Hello everybody, I'm going to be installing OES 2018 Service Pack 2 from scratch. I'm doing this inside a virtual environment using Oracle VirtualBox. When installing a VM, usually I only set it up with the OS disks inserted first, without anything for NSS or other services. So this is just to get the OS running. I made a 25 gig drive. In production you'd probably do a larger one, but I will not be using 25 gig in this install. So I'm starting the VM. Here's the boot screen, and at this point you could pick different methods of installation. If you were doing a remote installation, there's options here that you would fill in the boot options. I'm just going to press enter on installation. And here we see OES booting, and OES is Open Enterprise Server. If you're not familiar with it, it's compatible and legacy. It's a legacy of Netware. So a lot of Netware services were ported to Linux years ago, and OES is the current revision of that. So some services that existed in Netware also exist in OES, and of course there's newer things also in OES. One of the things OES requires is that you give it a static IP address. So I will be giving it a static IP address. Alright, one of the first things that you can do is register your software with Micro Focus. Since I'm doing this as a demo, I'm going to configure that later. And sometimes if you don't have all your network connectivity set up, you could just click on configure later and come in and fill this registration stuff later. So now I'm going to click on network configuration, and you can see it's right now set up for DHCP, and that would work for boot, but it'll usually complain. So what we'll do is we'll just put in the static IP. I'm just going to use an internal IP address, and I'm going to give this a name, and this will be I'm going to do cluster1-node1, just so in a later episode I could make a cluster with this server, and that'll be my naming convention. So I have CL1N1 is for my name, and I believe I'm going to have to do a routing. Default gateway is 10.0.2.1. And I'm also going to enter the DNS cluster 1 node 1. This would be demo.net. How about that? And we'll just do 8.8.8.8 for the DNS. There we go. We're back and we'll be ready to take the next step. Alright, so we hit next. There's really not a lot of, these are pretty simple next type settings. The install is fairly simple. You know, there are options here that I'm not going to go through, but if you had an add-on product, they give you the option to do that. But OES is already integrated in this. The base OS is SUSE Linux, or SUSE Enterprise Linux. And we're pretty much going to go with most of the defaults. This is interesting that you could, you know, run a Xen or KVM server and then run the OES servers under Xen or KVM. So you do have a virtualized option if you just want to, you know, use the same OS for your virtualization host and your services. I've done it in the past. It's good. It was a long time ago when I was using Xen, and Xen was highly stable. Very happy with it. KVM is nice too, but anyway, we're not doing that. We're doing the default. So I'm clicking next. If I wanted to change the drive settings, I could do it here. I'm taking exactly what the defaults. Picking a time zone. I am in Central, therefore I'm picking it. There we go. Alright, we're to creating a user. So my local user, I'm just going to say IT, and we'll give it a password of demo 100. Oh. And you have an option of using this for your root password. I'm saying, yep, sure, we'll have the same password. That's up to your policy at home, and in a demo, this is no problem. And at work, that may be a problem. And then same with automatic login. Usually I would not auto log in a server, but there might be cases where you need it. This would allow the machine to boot all the way up to the desktop without requiring a password. Alright, so I'm going to move on to that. Oh, I'm sorry, and I didn't talk about, you also have the option of just not creating another user, and you would only be creating the root user. But best practices, create the user so you have a non-privileged account to do your normal maintenance, and it will always prompt you for the password if you need to do any administrative tasks. It's yelling at me because my demo 100 password is too simple, but I'm using it because this is a demo. Again, we can just hit next here, but I'll quickly look through. It says we're using Micro Focus Open Enterprise Server 2018 SP2. Some of the base settings, the boot, the things I usually check for. You know, I would like SSH to be enabled. It is enabled by default. The firewall is enabled by default. If I wanted to disable it, I would click here. If I wanted to disable SSH, I could click there. I'm keeping all the default settings, so I'm hitting install. And now I get the one option to confirm that I'm installing, and I am. At this point, the OS will be installed, and you'll be watching some of these slideshows telling you the different products in OES. If you're not familiar with OES, I recommend you go to Micro Focus's page and look up some of the support. The main support, OES, if the main support is really coming from probably Netware past, and if you have some infrastructure that's using Netware, OES is a great step up from that. And also, if you're just a Linux shop, OES gives you some of the Microsoft services that you may need to run certain software that is linked, or requires Active Directory. OES can emulate Active Directory using their eDirectory product. They also have the NSS file services, and NSS is a proprietary file system that was created by Novell, and it has some nice things that other file systems don't have, like salvage. Salvage allows you to recover deleted files, and the other thing I like with salvage is it also gives you the metadata of the deleted file, so it can tell you who deleted it and when. And that's kind of a nice forensic tool that you don't see in other operating systems. Like, for instance, if you had a virus that was infecting your server from a client and it started deleting files, you're able to see, who deleted the file, when did the deletion start happening. That way you can find the virus infected PC that is attacking the files on the server. You know when it started, so you have a chance to go back to a recovery before the infection started damaging files on the server, stuff like that. So it makes it's kind of good, to be able to see that. And plus, if someone deleted something, you can see who deleted it. So even if it's accidentally deleted, you can go, well, so and so had deleted that file. So it's a nice service. I would miss it if I didn't have it in my production environment. Another nice feature of OES is their clustering, which they're kind of bringing up here. It comes with a 2-node cluster for free, which is good, and it depends on what you're scaling. But what I usually use the 2-node clustering for is to be able to do maintenance during normal business hours, because you can have one node active, and the passive node would then, you could patch it, reboot it, then migrate your cluster resources over to the fully patched node, and then bring down the node now that is the passive node, and patch it. So for patching, it's made it real easy. I don't have to do it after hours. I can patch a node during the day, and then I can schedule my resource migration, and that doesn't take more than a few seconds to have the resources move over to the other node. And the console and control is pretty nice for that. Another nice feature with OES is it's web administered. So it's almost like an appliance. Once it's installed, you can pretty much manage everything about the server through the web. And there's a tool that comes with the server called iManager, and it can control pretty much everything with the server. And then there is one more web page for specific physical things that are related to your appliance or server. So it's pretty nice, and it's flexible. The other thing that OES comes with is it has its own client, so you could install a OES client, and it uses proprietary protocols to talk to the server, And there could be pluses and minuses in doing that, but it also supports Microsoft and what they would say is SIFs, file sharing. This server could also join a domain and share files over SIFs. It also can work with Apple File Protocol, which is another neat thing. And then it also works with the standard Linux protocols and services. I'm going to pause this while it's installing, and I will be right back as soon as it's gotten past this screen. Okay, the server then rebooted right after it finished that task, and I just stopped it from completely booting because I wanted to make sure I recorded it, but you would just let it go through its boot process, and there we go, it's booting into OES2018SP2. Oh, that was me. And it's basically booting right back into the configuration part of the install. Okay, and after it's rebooted, we get some of the OES configuration settings here, and there's not much. I'm again just hitting next. A lot of this initial configuration is not really too difficult because it's mostly next, 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 next. Okay, the install has finished. We've successfully installed. And yeah, and then clone. This allows you to make, if you're going to automate some installs later, you can copy this installs. It's a default of SUSE Linux or SUSE Linux. So I'm going to let it clone, and then we're done with this install. And there it is. This is where the install finishes. The system is just asking you to log in. So we've finished the base install of Open Enterprise Server 2018 SP2, and we will do configuration of services in another video. Thank you.